This is my latest Hylian Shield, and I thought I'd make a video showing some of the aspects of crafting this. But well, I actually was going to make a whole bunch of little videos and post them bit by bit, you know. But I kind of thought it's best to save them up and make a more cohesive overall video. It's not really a step-by-step how to make it, but just discussing some of the points along the way. I haven't included laminating the boards for the shield. That is it's something that's explained in an old post from ye old Gaffers about his shield press creation, and he shows how he makes his shield press, and that's kind of what you need to know for that. But yeah, I'll just show you some of the things that I've done along the way for building this shield. So it has a gauge strap which goes up over your neck or shoulder. You can use it to carry the shield, but you can also use it in fighting to get the shield out of your way, chuck it behind your back, and then you can swing it around to the front when you need to use it. But yeah, you can also use it for carrying. Hey folks, just thought I'd give you a look at how I'm doing the strap bolts in this shield. I'm going to have a full decorated front on this shield with leather overwrap, and it's going to be fully tooled leather. So I didn't want the bolt heads in my artwork on the leather. So basically what I've done is I've gotten these mushroom headed stainless steel bolts, and I've ground them down. I've taken the sides off. Taking the sides off so that the heads are keyed basically to the slots, so that I've got them recessed in there. I'm going to fill this up with epoxy. I've cut the recesses with the Dremel and some little carbide burrs. The main thing being that, you know, the sides match the sides of the bolt, so it's keyed. The bolt then can be, like I say, I'm going to fill that with epoxy and then fill over the bolt too, so that I can sand it down flat and have a nice level surface. And then the bolts will be permanently inserted. That way, if the straps break or wear out, they can be replaced in the future without disturbing the bolts, which will be set in there permanently. And as I say, that's going to be filled with epoxy, sanded, and then overwrapped with leather, so that will not interfere with the artwork. On the back, I'm going to attach them with I've got some spacer washers there just for now, just while I set them. Once I put the epoxy in, I'm going to tighten that. But for the leather strap work, I'm going to put these nice brass washers on, just for a bit of bling. And I want to use all non-steel. I don't want any sort of like zinc-plated steel or nickel-plated steel, whatever it is, because they will eventually rust. So I'm using, I think it's 304, is it? No, it's 316 stainless steel dome top nuts. And the bolts are also 316 stainless steel, so they'll be permanently rust-free and last forever, hopefully. And then the brass washers, obviously, they won't rust either. So yeah, just a slightly upgraded hardware, just for a bit of bling, and so it is long-lived. And yeah, so pretty straightforward. I'm going to fill those with epoxy now and tighten them down. So yeah, I've also skimmed the tops off, and they didn't need to be as thick as they were, just so I didn't have to recess them down as far. Where I've cut the recesses, it was kind of cool that I went through the first 2 plies of the wood, and then I could feel and see the 3rd ply, which sort of gave me something to work to get a nice level surface. I could sort of see as I was skimming off that 2nd ply, the colour of the wood changed, so it allowed me to sort of face that down to a nice clean recess for those bolts to sit into. That's how I've applied the epoxy, just with the bolt hanging out about 1/4 of an inch. That way it protects the threads that are already inside the timber. So it's got epoxy on the threads that are going to be in the timber, but the threads that were protected inside the timber will be the threads that the nut attaches to, so it keeps it clean at least. Make a nice little mound on top of each one, which will be sanded flat afterwards. And then I'll pop the nut on. When this is in use and I attach all the nuts finally with the straps, I'll add some non-permanent locking agent to them so that they don't have to be clamped onto the straps too hard. And I've obviously measured all the bolts to allow for locking down the straps to get the because obviously they're in there now. I don't really want to be grinding them shorter once it's all put together. So I've double checked all my lengths and ground down the bolts to length and dressed the threads at the end. So yeah, that should be cool. I guess while we're looking at my shield, I'll just mention that this is made from 2 pieces of 1/4 inch ply, which are laminated in a shield press, which I built the shield press as per ye old Gaffers instructions, which is a now defunct website, which was really cool, had some great instructions in it for the shield press. I can put a link up to that in an archive. I've saved copies of it on my computer too, if anyone can't find it. So yeah, 2 pieces of 1/4 inch plywood, and they're curved in the shield press. These are recessed down about, about 2.5 mil, the top 2 plies. So it still leaves about 10 mil of timber that those bolts are biting onto. So they'll be plenty stronger than the leather straps. The leather straps will be the weak link in the chain, so to speak. So as long as that's all strong enough, the straps are replaceable. And yeah, I'll add leather risers to this and a little metal badge to it, and all my artwork obviously. A look at the artwork in progress on the shield now. So I've filed down the epoxy from these bolt heads, and the bolts are still attached for now, just while the epoxy sets for a few days, just to make sure it's fully rigid before I release the nuts. So basically with the artwork, what I've done is sketched it at 1:2 on a A3 piece of sheet, and figured out my layout. Generally I work mainly on 1/2. I know that, if I'm happy with that half, I'm just going to mirror that and flip it over to the other side. And the same with the sigil for the center of the shield. Yeah, the chicken's outside. Yeah, same thing there. That's just sketched on 1/2, and then that'll flip over. I've redesigned the loft wing sigil to imitate the form of the guard of the sword. So that's like the wing of the guard of the sword, but I've basically wanted to imitate that in the wing of the loft wing. I've added a little bit of detail just to make it look a bit feathery. But yeah, I like sort of bringing elements of the different parts of the design into the sword, from the sword into the other components of the kit, just to keep it cohesive. So yeah, there's my artwork. I've sort of planned it there, and then I've sketched it directly onto the board. So again, only sketching 1/2 because I'm going to mirror that, but I've sketched it directly onto the board using like center lines, 90-degree lines up here for this line. For calculating that piece, I've split the angle down the center between those two. The Triforce sigil in the middle, there's just a basic outline of where the loft wing's going to go, so I've planned that. And yeah, for the leather risers, again, I've just planned one side in pencil. I've started sticking them down. I thought this would be a good time to show you what I'm doing. So for the leather risers on this, I've actually glued together a 3mm piece of leather on top of a 1.5mm piece of leather, which is our 4 ounce and 8 ounce, or a 1/16 and 1/8 inch. So what's that, 3/16 total thickness there, or about 4.5mm for those risers. These risers are just a 1.5mm leather, a 4 ounce leather, so that's going to step between the piping on the edge there and the actual I don't know what you call those anyway, but and again, I've sculpted these before fixing them on. So that's just ground on a 40 grit wheel on the belt sander. You can see these bits too are three-dimensionally sculpted. Those are just the 3mm leather, which I've ground on a belt grinder with a 40 grit belt. But yeah, you can see that's going to mold quite nicely underneath the overwrap. Again, with the overwrap, I'm going to plan where my risers are. I'm going to skive that down, so it's going to be a 1.5 or a 1/16 thickness overwrap, and I'm going to plan where the risers are. I'm going to skive that to about half that thickness, but keeping the full thickness in the center for where I'm going to tool the loft wing. So of course I want my tooling as deep as possible, but where the risers are, I want it a bit thinner just so it molds nicely. And so once those are underneath the riser and I've molded it, it'll look nice and three-dimensional. So yeah, that's what I'm up to. Pretty straightforward. I say that, but you know, the final effect should be pretty spectacular, hopefully, if I get my my dye work and paint work spot on. Now with all the leather risers added, time to do the wrap. There's the front face of the leather applied and molded. You can see how well it's taken, you know, the riser moldings. So I've mainly used just like mostly a smooth bevel for molding most of that. I did use some textured bevels. With the smooth bevel, I've put a bit of leather over the top of it just to protect my hand, and then yeah, I've got a couple of textured bevels that I use just around the Triforce there. But mostly I wanted to keep it smooth. Also use the handle. It's a cherry wood mallet that I use the handle to rub, like to bone the smoother faces. But yeah, it's just a matter of wrestling it and molding it and hammering it where you need to. In the corners, you got to whack it pretty hard just to stretch it out and get it in there. Getting between two sides that you're trying to get in. When you do one side, it pulls the other side out. You do the other side, it pulls that side out. So sometimes you need to kind of use three hands and hold both down at the same time. And you just keep working it. And once it's sort of gripped down a bit, you can come back to the other side. And once it's tacked down somewhat, and have another go at it. You can see it's still wet. I keep it really wet. Like I totally soaked it when I first put it on. And yeah, I just pressed down the middle and then straight away started working around the edges and then started doing the details. It probably took over an hour anyway to mold all of that down. Probably an hour and a half. But just keeping it wet also stops the glue drying too soon. The whole thing was slathered in wood glue, Type Bond original. Just going around it now with this little guy, just making the details more crisp. You can kind of really get it in under there. With that sharp point, you got to be careful not to cut it. But yeah, just getting it right in under, almost undercutting, but just creating a crisp edge line. Here you can see the completed leather tooling. So there's risers under this part, but not all that. It's just simply tooled. I use a bit of blue pen in the marking of it because sometimes the marks fade when you wet it. Where I've traced the tracing paper, the pen leaves a bit of an imprint, but sometimes when you wet it that fades a bit. But because I'm going to dye it blue anyway, it doesn't hurt to use a bit of blue pen on it here and there. That's the other part of the stencil. Okay, applying the dye, I'm using a Prevel spray pack and to get this airbrushed effect. And for this one, I think I'll go black, a little bit of purple, and then the blue in the center. Will give it a nice antique sort of look. My last one I did blue on the outside and a teal blue-green in the middle. Yeah, obviously that's a fun part of the artism, but yeah, that's the tool for air spraying your dyes on. Purple added. Now with the blue added, for some reason the blue has this weird pinky golden oil sheen sort of a thing on it until you grease it. Once you grease it, I've greased this corner here. You can see once it's greased you can see through that and there's just the black and purple. But I'm painting that, so I don't want to grease it all. But yeah, it's weird how that Phoebing's light blue has this strange sort of pink pearlescence to it. But yeah, it should be good. I'm going to start painting now. Working on the paint now, I've put a base coat of Angelus red and then an overcoat which is the same red mixed with their 24 karat gold pearlescent. But yeah, that's really cool, makes it metallic. Another thing you can get is these Pearlex mica sparkle dust, and you can mix that with your paints too to make them metallic. You can also mix that those mica dusts with the what's that super sheen stuff, you know, like the Tandy Leather super sheen overcoat. You mix some of that in there and you get a metallic finish too, so that's going to be pretty cool. On the wingtips I've done the violet paint as a base coat and then mixed violet with gold to make that metallic too. I'm painting the gold highlights on the piping, and I just thought I'd give a few things that I've figured out lately. You know, as life goes on, I figure things out a bit better. Now, the brightest gold colour I've found is this Angelus 24K pearlescent, but the thing is, it doesn't give a good coverage. You need to do like 4 coats with it. But what I've been using lately is a base coat of the bronze, the Angelus bronze, which that's only a single coat here, and that gives far more solid base coat. So I just need to do 1 or 2 coats of the Angelus bronze to get a good solid base coat, and then I add highlights with the 24K because it is quite a transparent paint, that one. So I just do highlights with that and it sparkles up really nicely. It's a really bright sparkly paint, but it just doesn't give good coverage. It's quite transparent, but it sparkles great. And then what I also do is I'll mix flat black with the bronze on my little mix 'em up palette, and I'll do my patina points, like so, you know, all the low points basically. I'll paint them in dark with a mix of the flat black and bronze and whatever in between. Similar to what I've done, I don't know if you can see it, like on the wings here, I've just mixed in a bit of flat black to give a bit of patina into the low points of the tooling around the feather there. Yeah, so little tip on painting. Obviously a nice fine brush helps too. I don't know what these are. These are Mont Marty. That's a size 8/0. It's just a nice little, it's got a nice fine tip. It's got, they don't like fluff up, they don't feather up, they're a synthetic tip. Yeah, so it makes life a lot easier if you've got a good brush. It doesn't, you know, chucking paint in all directions, you know, with the feathery tips. Another point I was going to make about just my tooling in general. So I've used a swivel knife and a rule to get the straight lines on these, which, you know, obviously using a rule helps. And then I've gone along with this tip. Now this is quite a sharp tip. It's actually, it can cut the leather a bit. It's a really sharp tip. This is a really cool tool. I don't know the brand. It says on there Craft Japan, and then the model number SKB 701-2. But it's a fine, it's a very fine beveler. And what I do is I go along like normal. You go along and do your outer bevels, dun, 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 and I just hammer tap, 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 tap. But then after you've done that, you got lots of little impacts, and there's little lines between each one. So after I've done that, I just swipe it along, like I go along with it while it's still moist, and I swipe it along, and it just smooths out all those things. And then what I do is I turn it around and I swipe it along the actual, you know, the job, the actual the design, and I bevel the edges of that too, and I just do it on all sides. So I'll go along and I'll just like rub it like that, and you can see how it's just rounded it. All the tooling is just kind of rounder. You can see it pretty well here. I should have showed you before I painted it. Yeah, you can see there that it's just crisper, because often where you've beveled up against something, you have a very square edge and it can kind of waver, but this gives it a tighter sort of finish. And I've done it on all of the tooling, not just the piping there, but the whole thing. You can see how it's rounded. The horns here, which is nicer. Obviously being quite a sharp thing, you can undercut stuff too. So if you want to lift things, you can get under there with that. But yeah, it's a really good beveling tool. I thought I'd mention it. I really like it. Obviously this is a coarser bevel, but I wanted that just to show a bit more shadowing there. Yeah, but yeah, for actually modeling the leather, I really like this one. It's quite steep too. And yeah, I'd just also throw in a mention that Tandy bevels, like Tandy tools in general, are pretty crap. So look elsewhere. I got this from Birdsall Leather in South Australia, BIRDSALL. But yeah, those Tandy bevelers, they're better. You can get these ones on eBay that are like a Chinese cast of the Tandy ones, and they're real chunky and shit. But this thing is so crisp. Like the Tandy ones are half decent, but sometimes the castings aren't clean, and you know, they're just not that crisp. But this is crisp. It's quality stuff. If you buy a range of bevelers from that brand, you'll be very happy with them, I guarantee it. Yeah, those were just a few points I had in mind. I was just going to say, yeah, too, regarding the bronze colour base coat, is it gives it a bit more depth, being that bronze colour. The super sparkly 24K gold, like everyone's putting gold highlights on their stuff, but I think just straight up bright gold can look a bit cheap and tacky, whereas the darker bronze, and then once you mix it, so I add the matte black and I put that into the overlapped areas to give it that darker shadow. And I also tend to mix the 24K with the bronze for the highlights rather than just going straight for the 24K, because it stands out a bit much. But yeah, mixing the paints is always an option, and it just gives it more of a solid metal look, more of an authentic sort of bronze or brass look than just that like cheap tacky bright gold worth playing around with. That's another point, is that although you can get the like the antique finish paste that you rub in to your leather work and then swipe off, and that it sits black in the recesses, kind of like what I've done here with the paint. I don't know if you can see that well. The problem with this stuff is it really stains all your leather and makes everything much darker, and you lose a lot of colour, whereas selectively painting with that mix of the flat black or even a gloss black and the paint you're working with, and painting in the patina, it gives you so much more control, and you know, it does look better because you don't lose all your colours to the you know, the stain of the black. It doesn't matter how quick you get this off, it always darkens your leather, and you know how deep these colours are already, it's hard to get a good show of colour on them. So yeah, consider painting your patina rather than relying on that paste. It's just a lot more professional, and you get a better control and better finish. Just adding the patina, what I've done is I've just mixed some matte black with the bronze. So I've got about 2/3 matte black, 1/3 bronze, and yeah, just pop it in there, rub it out with your finger, and you can see it just sits in the low spots, and then everywhere that the knotwork overlaps, basically you know, get in there. You can either feather it out with your brush or just give it a tickle with your finger. And then another thing to do is like in the middle of your like your base color, just add a bit of darkness in there, because like if you look at it like antique bronze, it's the corners that are rubbed shiny and the middles are the darker areas. So I'll probably go and do highlights, just tickle it along the corners, just to look like it's worn, and then you know, in the middles get a bit of darkness in there. I'm trying to be random. But yeah, hopefully hopefully I can achieve some effect. See how it goes. Trying to show the finished effect, going backwards and forwards a bit between the mix of bronze and gold and the mix of bronze and black, just trying to get that sort of antique sort of look on it. But that 24 karat gold really sparkles, it's really shiny, so I use it a bit sparingly. Yeah, it's really effective. So you can see the strap set up here, a crossed strap for the hand grip, for strap there. I've made that adjustable just by having a range of holes which can be put onto here. I made my arm fit the biggest because I've got almost 14-inch arms, so not many people have arms that big. I figured I know my client won't, so he can adjust it down to his arm size. That's veg tanned leather. I just did a little bit of tooling just so it's not boring. Now for the matting, like the wadding, the padding inside here, because that's got like a foam padding in it, just as an impact absorption. I was trying to find a piece of this to show you, but this is the only bit I had in my bin that I could find. It's like a 1/4-inch foam, and it's got this polyspun stuff on top of the bottom. It's some sort of matting from the craft like fabric shop. And I've got 3 layers basically. There's a narrow strip in the middle, like a full length narrower strip, which helps it get the arch, and then the full width 2 layers over the top of that. I've adhered them together using a spray-on craft glue. So I've also adhered it to the timber. So I've gone like, I've put the 3 pieces together with the spray-on craft glue, and then I've put a bit against the surface that's going to go against the timber, and another bit of spray glue on the surface that goes against the leather, so it's all fixed in there nicely. But yeah, 3 layers of this basically. So the cross strap here, the gauge just goes under this bolt, I skived them down so that they both fit under the bolt. Same with this end, I just took 1mm off each strap just so that they fit under. I put the decoration for this side of it facing forward so it's visible from the front, and that's adjustable through the lacing there. And then that nut holds the badge on the front, and I'll just give you a look at how I've done that. So that badge is actually stainless steel background with 3 brass sections brazed onto it. And the previous one I made I glued in place, but this one I thought I'd try and have it secured without glue, and I'll just pop it out and you can see how I've done it this time in a second. Just regarding the antiquing with the silver paint, just to give it a metallic effect, obviously I put a heap of battle damage onto it and just textured it to give it a more antique patina. And just over the silver paint I just textured it using these guys, which are just little leather tools that I made up. I just randomly filed across some pieces of blade offcut, just randomly filed them to create random textures, and that's handy for texturing either metal because it's hardened steel, so I can use it on mild steel things like pommels and stuff, or I can use it on leatherwork. So yeah, with just the silver paint, instead of using an antiquing paste, what I've done is just use the matte black Angelus paint and just like painted it into the textures and then just wiped it with my fingers, sort of thing. Does the same as like an antiquing paste but with paint. And just the more texture you get, the more black you can get in there, the more it kind of looks like real metal. Similar to what I've done with the bronze. And the cool thing is you can see the real brass and the painted brass, like they match up so well. I'm really pleased with the matching of them. So I'll just pop that badge out. And you can see it doesn't even come out easily. Like that won't move it, I have to hammer it. So yeah, basically with the stainless steel sheet, I've just drilled holes in the backs and brazed on the each piece of brass. But before I've done that, I've TIG welded, because obviously the brazing heat is lower than the TIG welding heat, so the braze would have fallen off after while I was welding. So I've done the welding first. So I welded on, this is 316 stainless and they're 316 bolt here. Just use some 316 wire, twitching wire as filler wire for the TIG. Filed it back so it fits down flush against the leather. The leather's pre-drilled with 6mm thread hole, but then I put like an 8mm hole just shallow, just to allow a bit of space for this filed back weld. And then that one's just one of those bifurcated rivets that I use on the leatherwork, and I'll just use that to locate it. So once they go in, that's like a really nice flush fit. And once that nut's done up, it's not going anywhere. So yeah, that was nice. Something I wanted to try, see if I could fit it up so that it was a good flush fit without glue. Just a challenge for myself. There she is, a little work of art. I'm really happy with it. A couple of other points crossed my mind. On the back of it, that's just the timber dyed black, and then I've added shellac to it. I've done a couple of applications of shellac, and then I've just added a gun wax, like that hardening wax that I use on everything. I'm just giving it a nice resilient sort of surface finish, and it looks good, better than just raw timber. And I was going to suggest to my clients, once he's adjusted these and whatnot, rather than over tightening the dome nuts and pinching down on the leather, just add a bit of Loctite semi-permanent, like the the non-permanent locking agent, just Loctite thread lock. just to keep these from wobbling loose without having to tighten the hell out of them. And I think the brass washers and the stainless steel nuts just look nice. He might not want the gauge, so I don't know, he might want to take that off. Depends how he's displaying it or what. He might want to take all the straps off for display. Who knows?